Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for the Acolyte episode 5, which is called Night. Last episode was called Day. I think the setup from last episode, I think we knew this was going to be obviously action-packed and that there was pretty much no way it was going to be like not kind of what we expected it to be, and in my mind it exceeded expectations. I was expecting a good fight because I think from the clips and stuff like that we had seen, I think they knew going in this is a bit of a main event episode for the show, and the choreography throughout this was great. They were not afraid to kill off characters, including like main cast members. We obviously had a few random Jedi here, but they went further than that. And the big thing, I think, for anyone who really cares about their lightsaber fights, is the choreography was very, very good. This is effectively some of the best stuff, I think, since the prequels that we have had. I think in more recent shows, especially post-sequels, we've been getting back on track, I think, with where the lightsaber fighting needs to be. Some of the stuff in Ahsoka I thought was, solid, but maybe, not absolutely amazing. The Obi-Wan Vader fight, I think in that case, maybe partly just because of the people involved, was never going to be like bad, and it definitely had some nice sequences in it, but just consistently it was super strong throughout this episode. And it wasn't just all about the action. Like, every word that our Sith Lord said here was interesting. They continue to build towards what is the truth from everyone else's perspective of what happened on Brendok 16 years ago, and there's more direct setup towards that obviously I guess is coming. I think we more or less are getting the impression it's going to be probably episode 7, because it feels like they do have to have the next episode be a bit of the aftermath here, but at the same time it's also very, they have to be quite careful with what they do here, and not like, okay, Soul has survived, in a way Osha has survived, but at least she's there with the Sith Lord, but Soul surviving, you have to be careful with that to avoid potential continuity problems. But once he doesn't report to the other Jedi, we're in an okay position, ultimately. But it does mean that, the Sith Lord is going to have to at some point take out Soul, or someone else is going to have to deal with Soul before a report like that happens. And so I do wonder with Kymer how quickly he's going to move to kind of act, given what has kind of happened here. So I really liked the episode. I thought it was good. Again, it was a bit of a shorter episode. I think it was basically the same length as the previous episode, but it worked better here because this was the action-centric episode. And it was like, okay, the dialogue scenes felt kind of important when we cut away from the action, whereas in episode 4 it did just kind of feel like a short episode where we could have done a lot more if the episode was like 10-12 minutes longer. So let's just get into it, because we need to get into the details at this point, I think, to have a proper discussion. So we open up, and of course this was obviously going to be the key thing. How do they approach following up the cliffhanger ending to the last episode? Do we just jump straight in? Here is immediately, like the second after that, this is what happens. Instead, what we do is Osha has been sort of unconscious for, like, say, a minute. And so she wakes up with the action in progress, but it's not like we've missed a ton. We've only missed a little bit. And this is obviously, from a choreography point of view, the one thing that they want to be careful about is how on earth do you choreograph a, 8-on-1 lightsaber duel? It's definitely possible, but it's kind of tricky. So early on, the idea of her kind of seeing bits and pieces, flashes through the trees, and you getting a little bit of a sense of the choreography, but some of it being hidden, I think is the right way to do the early sort of super chaotic points, and kind of avoiding getting yourself into an episode 8 kind of throne room sequence where you have this giant one versus many sequence, and it's so difficult to have that choreography look good. But I think they did it well here. They knew what they were doing, that this is a main event fight scene that has to be done well, and they put the time and effort in. I think you can tell. But yeah, interesting in the opening scene that she trips, and here's where you see basically the force push from before, the trails of kind of dust as everyone's been pushed back, and we see one of the Jedi dead on the ground already. This is one of the randomers. We don't actually see how this Jedi died, but I'm guessing when they were pushed back, this guy charged forward and probably got cut down like immediately. And that's sort of the implication of what happens. Then we get the fighting kind of through the trees as she kind of slowly makes her way forward. She's still a bit stunned. And then we start to see the fighting a little bit clearer as the numbers start to dwindle, as we start to see these characters get cut down. So of course we see the Keldor Jedi, which we knew was not Plo Koon, but here's the confirmation of that if you were unsure. But then a super interesting angle on this as well that makes perfect sense for a a Sith who knows he's probably going to face at some point multiple Jedi, having armor that is lightsaber resistant but also kind of like anti-lightsaber. So I believe, even though I'm not sure if this has been officially confirmed everywhere, but I think if you know your Star Wars, this is effectively in super high, notable content, the debut of Cortosis in canon. If you know Legends, Cortosis has been used there before. There are books in canon that reference Cortosis, so it's not brand new, but it hasn't been used as much in canon is the big thing here. And that definitely seems to be the case here, because it's not just that, initially he was blocking with it, and I was just like, is it like Beskar or something like that? But no, the fact that it basically temporarily shorts out lightsabers that it blocks, that means it's Cortosis. That's the unique property of it. And so what we see here is that he's actually fighting with a Cortosis helmet and a Cortosis gauntlet on his kind of wrist. So the fighting is, I think, augmented by the fact that he's amazing with the lightsaber, but then he's just casually blocking stuff with his hand. He's casually like headbutting lightsabers to short it out and get the advantage. That's really, really cool to see. And you can see that happen here. Gauntlet block here to take out this lightsaber. Headbutt against this to block it. And of course, until the first time that this happens in the fight, the Jedi, of course, are going to be taken completely by surprise by this. Because why would you not take the opportunity to take a hand immediately or hit your enemy in their head if they offer it to you? But that is part of his tactics, of course. He has a few tricks up his sleeve, as well as being incredibly skilled enough to just take them out kind of by himself. And so, yeah, we get the idea, and Yord makes comment effectively on this later. His movements are very different than what you're kind of typically used to. He is not fighting in the usual sort of maybe honor of battle style of things. He's very much trying to, as efficiently and deadly as possible, take out his enemies. And so, yeah, it's just lethal combat here, the whole way through. And then, yes, we get the Cortosis kind of weaponry. I'm wondering, like, is that going to be something that just in, like, maybe like what the Fact Files type, website thing it gets referenced, or like will they acknowledge this in an upcoming episode? Because if you do know your Legends stuff, like one of the opening chapters of the Plagueis book is Plagueis and Tenebrous going effectively to a Cortosis mine that they've managed to find and kind of secure from under the nose of the Republic, because they basically highlight that this, just by definition, has to be this incredibly rare material that is protected by the Jedi / Republic, so that there isn't really an immediate counter to lightsabers. And that's kind of part of the story. They acknowledge it in like Darth Plagueis. And I assume the intent is the same pretty much in canon as well, that it's that rare, which is why we don't really tend to see it pretty much anywhere else. And most of the time when you see lightsaber resistant armor, it's the other materials that are resistant, but not like it'll short out the lightsaber as well. But anyway, then we get into more of the Jedi beginning to get taken out. We see also Yord kind of come into play here. And you'll note that like we have not seen Sol in the episode yet, and we haven't seen Jecki also in the episode yet. But yes, we get the death of some of the other Jedi here as we go through. And it's Yord kind of coming in to kind of save these Jedi when they get their lightsabers kind of deactivated by the Cortosis. But then he nearly gets taken out. He actually gets a cut on the leg. So he kind of gets a bit of the Dooku versus Obi-Wan episode 2 kind of treatment, where he's not taken out of the fight, but it's kind of a bad cut. The two Jedi then return to the fight, but one of them is obviously cut down like immediately, just cut straight across the stomach. And then he engages the other Jedi and manages to just very quickly stab her straight through. But then more than that, the other guy that's in there with them, he just force pulls this guy onto his blade as well. And there we go. Like 3 Jedi down in seconds. Super impressive. It's obviously meant to be a little bit reminiscent of obviously like Palpatine versus the Jedi in episode kind of 3, but they make more of a show out of like the fight lasting kind of a little bit longer. And then some of the stuff I don't have screenshots for is just like Osha and kind of May are obviously in or around while this is happening. May is still in the hood. Osha's outside. And here, what's interesting is that she fires the stun gun at the Sith, but I'm guessing the Cortosis kind of blocks it, and he has a certain amount of resistance to it, and so it doesn't really do anything. If she had kept firing, maybe I'm assuming she might have got through, but she's stunned that the first blow didn't do anything at all. And so, yeah, Yord asks Osha to run, and she does, realizing that she doesn't really stand a chance here. And then, yeah, we just get a scene in the hut. May's obviously watching from in there. She grabs Kelnocka's lightsaber and heads out, because that's a little bit of a plot point for later on. But anyway, then we move on to Osha running away, the Sith following. We see the lightsaber throw that I think we saw in a couple of the promo videos for the show. And we see it in full context here, that it's trying to chop down Osha, though interestingly, I don't think his intent is ever to actually properly kill Osha. Maybe he only fully decides that he kind of is interested in her more towards the end of the episode, but I think he, since the second he met her, has always been kind of interested in her as well, especially given that May has kind of gone against him at this point. But this is where Sol comes in. He blocks the lightsaber throw. Yord arrives, and Sol's like, I'll deal with him. You get Osha to the ship. And so the injured Yord and Osha kind of head off through the forest, of course. There is a little bit of a debate over like Osha wanting to go back, Yord wanting to follow orders, but we'll come back to this kind of later on in the episode about the kind of back and forth that happens a little bit about this. But then we finally get the Sith speaking. And interestingly, he's like, do you not remember me? Sol is like, I do sense something familiar. And so they clash. And interestingly, the first little exchange here, Sol gets the advantage. Like, they disengage from each other, but like the Sith has kind of like overreached on the last blow. And it's like only because they moved away from each other that like it's not nothing more has happened. And this is where Sol notes that, you carry a Jedi weapon, but you are no Jedi. He can sense that from his fighting style, as well as just the aura around him in the Force, I guess. He can sense he is no Jedi. We also get May exits the hut. This is where we get Jackie's arrival into the episode. Drop kick, really cool there. And we get a hand-to-hand sequence here as Jackie is trying to arrest May. And it seems like things are relatively even between the two, but you'd maybe say Jackie is actually the more skilled kind of combatant here. And it's only the fact that I suppose Jackie is trying to specifically arrest her that is getting Jackie a little bit into trouble, whereas May is like open to hurting her or restraining her, basically. But then back with Soul and the Sith Lord, and it. What I really like about the choreography here is that it has a little bit of the kind of Palpatine Mace Windu kind of style fighting, where it's this real sense where like each blow is like a killing strike. They're really going for it here. Again, it's quick. They are not really long sequences, but they're long enough that it's not just one or two strikes and we're backing off. So again, the choreography I just think is very strong in my opinion. And yeah, Soul is actually doing very, very well so far. And in general, broadly speaking, by the end of the episode, you sort of come to the conclusion that like he is a match for this Sith Lord. And if not for the chaos of everything else going on, just in terms of pure skill, Soul is better. But at the same time, this is typically the way this goes a lot of the times, is that a lot of Sith Lords are maybe not as good at lightsaber combat as the absolute top tier Jedi. But that's just a minor comment, I suppose, in the grand scheme of things. And so, yeah, Soul is like, I believe you trained May, show your face. But the Sith is like, no. I will not let you read my thoughts. Which is an interesting one that, like, I'm guessing he's powerful enough to block Soul from doing this, even if he wasn't wearing the mask. But it's almost just this insult against the Jedi of like, oh, this is what the Jedi are known for. You're always probing people's minds. Isn't that right? Because everything he's kind of saying is leading up to these taunts in the middle of battle, basically. And so, yeah, Soul asks, what master hides his face from his pupil? And a really interesting response here. The Sith looks kind of tellingly at Soul, and you can tell even though he's wearing a mask, and says, you tell me. With the idea, I think, being that, you hide your true face, you hide the truth from your pupil. You tell me what it's like. Why do you do this? Because that's what we're going to build up to more towards the end of the episode, is this idea that Soul has a truth that he needs to tell to Osha. So that's interesting. Back with the Jackie fight temporarily, she gets a cut on the thigh from May's knife. She screams, and we just use that to transition to Yord and Osha hearing this and feeling that, oh, maybe we do need to go back because we don't want to lose everyone and we could help in this. But do we follow orders and get away? What's the right thing to do is the kind of conflict going on here. Once again, Soul and the Sith kind of re-engage, and this time it ends with the Sith kind of having the advantage here. So of the first three engagements, it's like, okay, Soul gets the advantage initially. It's kind of even in the second one. The Sith gets the advantage here as he kind of kicks Soul away, which is, I think, is another part of the choreography that's quite good, is that they have sections where, like, without the lightsabers, they do hand-to-hand, but then in the middle of lightsaber combat, they will do bits of hand-to-hand as well. So a lot of hits got in against either side from just, like, punches and kicks, reminiscent of, like, the episode 1 fight, the episode 3 fight as well. So that's good stuff to see. And then, yeah, as Soul regains his feet, the Sith has vanished. And this is going to happen a few times over the course of the episode. If a character loses sight of the Sith for even like a second, he could just be gone. And so the idea of his surprise entrance onto the battlefield, he can get away kind of just as easily. But he knows he kind of has to deal with what's going on here because his apprentice has kind of forced this to happen by going against him. And remember that this is basically all happening because May pretty much said, I'll tell the Jedi everything I know about you and what's going on here. And the news that the Sith still exist can't really get out. That's the basic idea. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a discussion between them about what is it. Yord doesn't know, just that it doesn't basically follow the standard practices of combat, the rules of combat. He gets into your head and stays there. And then this is where we get a very interesting line, which I think is definitely going to come back into play. We saw it in episode 3. Her mother can do that. She saw her do it to a Jedi once, get into a Jedi's head. And this is also where they are following Basil I think earlier on, but now they've kind of lost sight of Basil, who seems to come into play more towards the end of the episodes in a little bit more of a plot-centric way, in that he obviously is going based on scent, so he knows the difference between the twins, whereas maybe just visually, maybe some characters won't. Basil will know who is who, but we'll get to that shortly. Back with the fighting, May attempts to cut Jeki's neck, but Jeki reverses it and basically finally cuffs, properly arrests May. She won this exchange. This is where Jeki reclaims Kel Naka's lightsaber, and this is right as the Sith arrives behind them. He's obviously here for his, apprentice who has betrayed him, and Jeki's just going to be kind of collateral damage here. But she activates her lightsaber, just in time here to defend herself. And she fights really well. I think you can tell by the fact that Soul is as skilled as he is. That has definitely been passed on to Jeki. Because she is very, very skilled. And they kind of portray her that way kind of pretty consistently here. High potential Padawan here. She eventually does get kicked aside at the end of this kind of sequence. And he just tells May to learn from this Padawan, basically what it is to be a loyal pupil. That's what he's looking for, and that's what she hasn't turned out to be. But anyway, Jeki then attacks, and she gets a nice kind of moment where she kind of she kind of goes up against some rubble and then really quickly kind of backtrack jumps, and it seems like she's maybe about to cut his arm off because she has kind of caught him a little bit unawares, but it's his arm with the gauntlet, and so he blocks her lightsaber with the gauntlet. This deactivates her lightsaber. This is her first time seeing this because she wasn't with the other Jedi when they experienced this. But she obviously has just picked up another lightsaber, so she has to switch to Kel Naka's lightsaber, and she blocks right as her actual lightsaber activates. And so we get this kind of dual wielding sequence here with Jeki. I also like the contrast of her own lightsaber, which she's obviously built, versus the quite large Wookiee lightsaber. I think that's kind of cool. And yeah, she actually presses forward and has the advantage here, which I think is quite cool, because that's kind of the thing with dual wielding, is that you have the ability to, I suppose, be very offensive. It's maybe not the best defensively, but that's the point here. While this is happening, May kind of basically just gets her arms from behind her back to in front of her back, but she still has the binders on, and she runs away. The first of 3 times, I think, in this episode, she will run away from being kind of cornered in a sequence. And then we see, the Sith realizes this and just decides, I'm toying around too much. I'm just going to end it. And manages to, in this exchange, destroy one of Jeki's lightsabers. I think it's Kel Naka's lightsaber, and vanishes. So this is that shot where they look at the ground and there's a lightsaber cut in half. It's Kel Naka's lightsaber that Jeki was using. Then we get Yord and Osha entering the forest with the moths. So there was a reason this came up and was almost like a bit of a random scene in the previous episode. It was to set up this sequence here of they have a slight advantage because they kind of came across this somewhat unique thing within the forest that the Sith maybe doesn't know about. And so she tells Yord, deactivate your lightsaber so we don't attract their attention. He eventually does, because he's very skeptical, I think, about trusting Osha as leading what they're going to do. But they decide, okay, we're going to slowly make our way through here. but they're still trying to escape. They haven't decided on anything yet, but we'll see what's going to happen. Then we get a very cool, kind of almost creepy sequence. Like, May's just running away, and then they throw this shot up on screen for like a second as like he calls her coward. You were going to betray me. She asks for forgiveness, but he just says, you've always been weak. He cuts her binders off, and then he goes to stab her, but this is where Sol arrives, and immediately, like, Sol and Jackie have not really met up, but he senses, I guess, that she's right there, and so is immediately able to sort of, like, do what he's doing to push the Sith in to fight against Jackie, and you can see that Master and Apprentice actually do work very well together here without even communicating super well. So that's very cool. But now we're into sort of like, oh, this is really cool here. Master and Apprentice 2v1 versus Sith. To a certain degree, like this is the classic Jedi versus Sith style of lightsaber fight. The Jedi and the Apprentice against the Sith Lord. This is going to be exciting. And yeah, they push him back. Multiple kicks against the Sith happen here, and I really like this because there's a clear sense of like Sol blocks, and then as he kind of blocks, he backs away, and she kind of comes through with like a kick to the leg or something like that. She does the same to create an opening for her master, and it kind of forces him to kind of be on the run a little bit. But he's also distracted because he can't focus too much on the fight because he also is hunting down his acolyte. So he's doing like multiple things at once here, and it shows how skilled he is that he's able to stay alive against two really skilled combatants while also tracking May and nearly killing her a couple of times. But that makes the choreography really good because it's not just fight choreography, there's also we're moving through an environment and I'm chasing someone at the same time happening. This I think is a quite interesting scene because I think the question has to come up, what is this that she's actually hearing? Because I think it's very clear, and it was clear after the first couple of episodes. It's not the twin connection happening here, because May does not seem to experience these moments where like Osha calls out to May. Only Osha is having these kind of hearing voices in her head, and it's the voice of her sister. But again, I don't think this is happening in any way because her sister is making it happen. So who is this that's making this happen? And it's like, I don't think it's our Sith Lord here, because I think he is probably, all of his time is taken up fighting and doing what he's doing here. So is this the Master, the Sith, the actual Sith Master, Chimer's Master maybe? Because we're assuming he's the Sith apprentice, trying to get his own apprentice to eventually overthrow his master. So is it the Master, or is this maybe the witches and there's some secret stuff happening in the background and this is the witches kind of making this happen? Or is this the idea of, and we've got little bits and hints of this, of like, is there actually a deeper darkness in Osha than there maybe is in May? And we're beginning to see that come out to the surface here. I'm not really sure. But her takeaway from this is that she's almost being called to go kind of back to where kind of May is to save May. So someone else is kind of calling her to basically, your sister's in danger type thing. Maybe it is part of a dyad style connection that they have, that they're alerted if either of each other is in danger, but we've not seen May experience this. And so this is where she turns on the torch, attracts the moths, and they're going to bring the moths to the Sith Lord, basically. And then we get this scene. Very, very brutal, tragic, but well done given what has to happen here. So the 2v1 duel continues. We get the Sith headbutting Sol's lightsaber to deactivate it. So that was really cool to see in a focused duel during this section here. But I love that Sol is almost like ready for it, because he's just immediately like, okay, my weapon, which can be an instant kill weapon, is deactivated, but this now allows me to kind of do stuff, more delicate stuff up close, hand to hand, and he just starts like pummeling the Sith Lord a little bit, really sending him flying back, because I guess what effectively happens here is like that the range dynamic of the duel changes the second Soul's lightsaber goes off because of how good he is at hand to hand, and so Soul uses hand to hand to push the Sith kind of down this kind of embankment, kind of like a little cliff face. And then Jecki kind of takes over because her lightsaber hasn't been deactivated. So I guess while Soul is getting down and waiting for his lightsaber to activate again, this is Jecki taking advantage of the opening. And she does, which I think is really cool. She cracks the helmet off, which I think is really cool, because I think it is a canonical thing with cortosis that it is brittle. So like it's got really good like energy absorption properties, but it's not good armor against like physical weapons necessarily. So this is why like the lightsaber butt to the face type stuff is actually doing a lot of damage to it, and it kind of cracks the mask in half. But when this happens, because she thinks she has the edge here, like she's just delivered this kind of blow, created an opening by knocking his mask off. She goes for the finishing blow, lightsaber above her head, but he's prepared for it. Like, oh, they're going to be distracted by seeing my face, and he uses this to, as we see here, he pulls his lightsaber apart. Not quite in it's not like a double-bladed lightsaber. It's just a smaller lightsaber kind of is the end of his lightsaber, because I think the blades go in the same direction. So if he was to activate the smaller one without taking it apart, he'd like destroy his weapon. So it's very much here to be like a little assassin lightsaber knife type thing. And he puts it to work perfectly here, where it's just three, like almost instantaneously, like it's almost blink and you miss it. It's just stab, stab, stab. She's dead. Like, she gets the most kind of shocking death in my mind in the episode. Though we'll get to the Yord one in terms of like the different way in which they do that. But I think the fact that the young character here, who's so likable, I think in a lot of the scenes we've seen her in, she's become friends with Osha in just a few scenes, like that sort of thing. The fact that she goes down so brutally like this is shocking. And they use this to kind of be the reveal of who it actually is under the mask, because effectively she collapses dead, and that's Soul getting the reveal of who it is. And there's a kind of brutal kind of aspect to that. So yes, it is Khmer. He is the Sith Lord, and the speculation was correct, though I feel like they basically kind of gave it away. But I don't think the show is lesser because it was kind of obvious. It's still cool that it's finally like out there, because now all of a sudden they know the identity, and he now has to deal with them. There's no chance of it being explained away as a random masked guy. They know specifically who it is, and as we'll get, you know, he effectively does reveal he is Sith in a scene or two. So that's the big reveal. And what I like about this is that, like, it's still Khmer, like without the modulation on the mask. Like, it's still him, but not as, I suppose, maybe pathetic as he was sort of acting as Khmer, the assistant character. We get him taunting Soul again by causing, oh, is that what its name was? Not kind of acknowledging her. Saul's angry, says, she was a child, but he says, you're the one that brought her here into the battlefield. I just, defeated a combatant, basically, is his logic. He then looks to May, who is shocked at who he is, and we get the full-on reveal that, yeah, she didn't have any idea that Khmer was the Sith Lord. It is a super shock to her. So he force pulls her over into a choke, and we get that here. And he's about to take her out, but Soul, he realizes, I suppose, to create an opening with Soul, he has to kind of, I'll threaten to kill her, you want to save her too, and that creates the standoff, allowing them to actually talk here for a little bit. So interestingly, Khmer says he has no name. Now, is that his true name before he ever got involved with being a Sith. That he has abandoned that. He doesn't know what it is. I'm guessing, like, this is probably getting into the idea of, like, wait, is he actually a Bane Rule of Two Sith Lord? Like when we're maybe talking about the idea of he is the apprentice, is he actually the apprentice? Like, he should be listed in, like, the lineage of Rule of Two, so he should have a Darth title, but we don't get what that is here. I do hope we get that before the end. I think the character is so interesting, if not just because of his fighting style in this episode. I would love to know what this character is. Darth, what? I would like to know. He does reveal, though, but the Jedi might call, like, what I am Sith. There's no incredible reaction to this, but he does say, you know, why would you risk discovery? And again, you get the Kymer stuff of, like, you know, I did wear a mask. It just got, you know, blown off. But what does he want? And I think this is kind of interesting from his philosophy, and especially with this show and what they're doing. What he wants is freedom. Freedom to wield his power the way he wants to without having to answer to the Jedi. And this plays a role in the backstory as well with the witches, because the whole idea is that, like, what? So other Force users are not allowed to train children because the Jedi say so, is sort of the logic that we're going for here. And so if you are a Force user, you should have the freedom to kind of use it in whatever way you want, but the Jedi are kind of, you know, creating rules around that. Now, maybe those rules exist for a reason, because a lot of the time other groups of Force users are effectively dark side or dark side adjacent, and maybe there's a reason for that, but, you know, that's the point from the Sith that's being made here. That is the criticism of them, is that they're almost the idea of, like, the Jedi are so afraid of other Sith users who aren't Jedi that they do everything they can to make sure that all the Force users are Jedi. That's the logic here. And so he does say, I want a pupil, an acolyte, but May went against him, and now he has to kill everyone here, especially now that they've seen his face. And he mentions, you know, I don't make the rules. And I thought he was going to say that, like, my master, you know, makes the rules or something like that. The Sith make the rules. But he's like, no, the Jedi do. And you say that we can't exist. And so because of that, everyone has to die. And that's his view on the situation. And then we get the death of Yord. He gets a really cool moment here, which is quite clever. Given that he's like the by the rules Jedi, this is a very clever thing that he does here. So he attacks from out of nowhere. He picks up Kymer's helmet, and basically, big attack with his lightsaber. Kymer blocks it with his gauntlet, so Yord's lightsaber deactivates. He then attacks Yord with his lightsaber, but Yord blocks it with the piece of the helmet that he has, so that deactivates Kymer's lightsaber. And so the two end up in this kind of like clinch, like right next to each other, no lightsabers activated, no one seemingly obviously having the hand-to-hand advantage here because they're just like, you know, grappling effectively. But what changes things is Yord reacting to the fact that, oh, it's this guy. Like, wait, what? And Kymer's just like, surprise, and then just, boom, quickly reverses the grip, basically like breaks Yord's arm, like dislocates his shoulder or elbow or something like that, and then just, boom, snaps his neck, and tosses the, like, you know, lifeless body of Yord off. And again, it's like, is this more shocking than what happened to Jackie? It's kind of more brutal because you don't expect, like, between Sith and Jedi them to kill each other in this way. You expect it to be some sort of a lightsaber wound, but it's certainly impactful, like what happens here. But again, love the use of cortosis throughout this. I think it's really, really clever that they decided to kind of pretty much debut it in like a live action show, so that's kind of good. May runs off again. Osha does hit her with the stun gun this time. And then we get what's a very interesting sequence, because Soul effectively beats Kymer hand to hand. Puts him on the ground, like kicks him a bunch of times, picks up his lightsaber, and basically, if not for Osha being like, I think you should stop, he could have killed him. Now, the question is is Keimer just kind of playing along with this, knowing that Osha was there, knowing that this was probably going to happen, and that he wants to get the moment of being able to sort of taunt Soul and have her question his trust, which is basically what happens. He asks, why do you trust your master after everything he did to you? And basically the idea, like he points out that his mind is twisted by darkness, don't listen to him. But Keimer's just like, I've accepted my darkness. What have you done with yours? And Soul doesn't answer, of course, because we don't know what that is. That's a reveal that will still have to come out. And this is obviously where you question, wait, how does Keimer know what happened? How does he know the truth? Did May tell him? Like, does May even know the truth herself? Because that's one way. The other way would be that he was involved in what happened 16 years ago, and knows it because he had a hand in the background. And this is where we get to the idea of, like, the Jedi have almost tunnel visioned into the idea of, well, this is the guy who's trained May. No one's asking the question of who trained him. Because at least they knew going in, like, May was a Force user as part of the Witch Coven. But this guy is like a random guy, and it's like, who trained you? Well, you're trying to create, get an apprentice of your own, so where did you get your skills from? No one's asked that question yet, which I think is super interesting. This is where the moths arrive. Soul deactivates his saber, and he says the Jedi do not attack the unarmed. So this is where we get the confirmation, I suppose, that they basically told us this, I think, in the last episode, but that this is the interpretation of the challenge. It's not that, like, you have to kill a Jedi without using a weapon. It's, no, can you kill someone who doesn't have a weapon? So it's the idea of you're allowed to use a weapon yourself, but can you do what the Jedi typically don't do? And so this is where we're presenting the idea of, I think they're pretty heavily implying that at least one part of what happens to make things go so wrong is one of those Jedi, I'm guessing, kills an unarmed witch at some point, and that's what causes everything to pop off. Now, it's complicated by the fact that, well, the witches have the ability to control people, but, like, surely they wouldn't control a Jedi to kill one of their own just to make it look bad. But then we get into the idea of, like, oh, what if a Sith made this happen in the background? Like, they would want this to happen. Because ultimately, we want to create a situation where this is not obvious that the Sith are behind it. Coming out of this, anyone investigating this after the fact, that it's not obvious that a Sith is behind it. Right now, it's obscured by the fact that the focus is on May and Osha. So a former Jedi, and then her sister, who's also Force sensitive, but it's more or less witch related. So I think what's happening here is that, like, Keimer is trying to use this big backstory of Brendok as the mask, effectively, for his activities as a Sith Lord. That this will get blamed on retribution from the witches, that, like, it's May doing all of this. She already, directly we know, has killed Jedi. Who's to say she couldn't kill more Jedi, especially if she got her hands on a lightsaber? I think that's the direction we're, I think, trying to go in with maybe the flow of information. But anyway, what we get then is he jokes about the rules. Yeah, you know, if you don't follow them, you can never break them, is what he says. Then she attaches Pip to Keimer, and this draws all the moths to him, and then he basically gets overwhelmed by like 6 or 7 of them attacking him at once. He gets lifted into the air. Obviously, in a later scene, we see that he deals with it, but it takes a minute or two, and it allows other people to get away, and that's, I think, perfectly fine. Nicely set up distraction, I think. Then we get the key bit. Osha's like, why did he say that? And Soul, you know, why did he say that I can't trust you? Soul says he will explain, but May arrives and stuns him. And so we're going to move that on for a little bit before we get it. But this is just as interesting. May and Osha finally, like, properly speaking to each other. May says everything she has done has been for Osha and their family. Osha disagrees. It was all for yourself. Everyone is dead because of May. May says that they got what they deserved, the Jedi. But Osha's like, but they were more family to me than you ever were. And that's the core of the kind of disagreement here, is that, like, when it comes back to it, it's like, you started the fire. You know, can you disagree with that? We've been shown that, effectively. May asks if Osha has forgotten who they are. The Jedi invaded their home. Osha disagrees with it being framed in that way because, at least based on what we saw from the first episode, it wasn't an invasion. We have to see what kicks off whatever happens with the witches, but so far we don't maybe have the implication of that just yet. This is where it's brought up that, like, May, you're the violent one. You started the fire. Osha will be dead if not for the Jedi. And May thinks that she's been brainwashed, which is kind of an interesting line because is it her just in a way like coping here of just like, you truly believe this, but no, the Jedi fed you wrong information. But then you ask yourself, like, the Sith is almost implanting the idea of like, oh no, not taking my helmet off. I don't want you to get into my mind. What if, are we implying that maybe brainwashing, manipulation of memories has actually happened here? And that some of these things that Osha feels very strongly about are not actually the case? Like, how much of a different perspective are we going to get when we go back into the flashback is the question I have, definitely. May can help her return to herself. She hugs her sister. She says she loves her. And basically he's like, choose me, not the Jedi. But we see Osha is crying at this, so there is emotion here. But she does attempt to restrain May to arrest her. May reverses it. There's a bit of more of an argument. And then we get the reference back to episode 3 of just like, hey, you've never been able to like block force pushes. And she pushes her off a bit of a ledge and knocks her out. She then grabs, I'm guessing it's Yord's lightsaber, I think it is. And she cuts her hair to be the same length as Osha. So now, effectively, the two look identical beyond the clothes that they're wearing. And what's visually the only distinct things between them is effectively that we know Osha has the tattoo on her shoulder, and then May has the witch mark on her forehead. They're really the only distinguishing visuals between the two characters now that their hair basically matches up. So, interesting point here. We get the scene of Kymer freeing himself from the moths as Basil randomly appears, revealing that he's tracking around. The fact that I suppose Kymer doesn't deal with Basil is somewhat interesting. Is Basil just that stealthy, or does Kymer not care? Sol makes up as May, wearing Osha's clothes, arrives, acting like she is Osha. And then we get the idea of like, wait, does Sol know and is acting along with it, or does he actually not know which sister it is here? They head off planet together. We see that Basil has made it onto the ship, and he's sniffing around behind May. So the idea is that obviously he knows which sister is which. When will he alert them to this fact? The other point would be like Pip, but I think Pip was just destroyed by Kymer, so that wouldn't get brought up unless like Sol is just like, hey, I'm sorry about your droid, and if May is just like, wait, what? Sol would know that way. But I'm not sure. Because like the wording is just like, oh, we're going after your sister. But because he wants to save both of them, it's like, Whereas typically, I get the impression he knows which sister is which. Like, if he's trained Osha for years, he should know what she specifically is like. Especially just maybe sensing her in the Force as well. So, it'll be interesting to see what way they play this, how much of a mystery this ends up being in the next episode. It could be nothing, it could be the focus, we don't know. And then final scene, Kymer picks up his mask and his cloak. He finds Osha on the ground unconscious, as evidenced by the tattoo, of course, and he knows which one is which, obviously, is the idea. He puts his cloak over her, and at least the way I interpret it is the fact that he doesn't just kill her, is he has a potential new acolyte. Because I think the point throughout this whole episode is that he's given up on May. All his attempting in like the last episode to convince her to go along with the mission, it's not an impossible task, and the fact that straight in front of him, he basically just said, oh yeah, I'm not doing that anymore, I'm just going to do this, don't tell the master, and he's just like, you were going to betray me. I'm done with you. I already haven't been maybe super impressed about certain things, but you can work potentially. Now, this is where we do need to get into the idea of Osha hasn't really used the Force. Now, the visions, I'm guessing, her being talked to by Little May, are Force visions, but she's not really utilized the Force as such. There was maybe the little bit where she touched the moth in the previous episode, but like, she's not able to block Force blasts. She hasn't like used the Force really herself. Why Osha, I suppose, is the idea, and then why is Osha not really able to use the Force? What happened? That's the truth of it. Which is why I am beginning to maybe lean into the idea that the theory that I think some people have had, which is that we really maybe didn't see the full truth of what happened at the end of episode 3. That, maybe the idea is that, like, has someone done something to protect her from herself? That maybe Osha played a bigger role in what happened than anyone thought, and Soul maybe is responsible for, like, changing her memories of this or in some way. Who knows? It's a mystery show, so of course we're going to have bits and pieces of speculation, but that is it. So I liked the episode. Like, I loved the lightsaber fighting throughout the whole thing. A lot of the dialogue scenes, I think, are building towards something very good. I'm excited for the next time we go into flashback. And then, I think in the present day story, I'm just kind of like, I'm not obviously sure what exactly is going to happen next. Because Keimer is going to want to eventually hunt down Soul. Because Soul can basically reveal, I fought a Sith. The guy who called himself a Sith. And unless we really are getting into the idea of he will report that to other Jedi and it will literally be a cover-up, I'm interested to see what kind of happens there. And then the fact that, like, okay, the backstory is going to happen, and I'm guessing in this case it will be, like, I'm guessing it's going to be Keimer telling Osha the story as Soul tells May, maybe? There's still an episode to move things around and see who's actually telling who, but I'm guessing that's a way for everyone to kind of get to the same point in terms of knowing roughly the information on what happened. And there's so many things that do need to happen there. Like, what is the truth about the whole idea of the twins were created? Who thought them to do that? Because it doesn't seem to be a standard witch ability. Did May light the fire? Did she actually cause that much damage? And then what exactly happened between the witches and the Jedi? Because we go back and it's again, didn't look like the witches had all been killed by lightsaber wounds or anything like that. So something killed them all at once. We don't know what. And there's so many questions surrounding, like, how did Torben get injured? Why was Kelnaka basically... Why did he, like, almost self-exile himself over what happened? And then I think Indara is kind of implied to be the one who potentially killed someone who was unarmed, based on, like, the opening scene of the show and them referencing that concept multiple times here. But then, how are the Sith involved? How does Keimer know what happened here is a big thing, and everything Sith related is super exciting. The question is obviously, like, how long does Soul survive? Because I think he's going to die at some point, but there is a bit of a question about who kills him ultimately, because I'm beginning to lean towards Osha turning dark based on maybe what the truth is, and she is the one to kill Soul, potentially when he's unarmed. And this is what confirms to Keimer that this is the right apprentice to have. Maybe. But I do think the show almost has to end with the idea of Keimer's master getting involved, which would almost imply that, like, I'm guessing Keimer has to die then, but, like, then you'd need a season 2. A lot of questions. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on the episode, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.